The festival had started early that morning, long before the sun had fully climbed over the fields. People from nearby villages had gathered with baskets of homemade food, handmade crafts, and stories they wanted to share. Children ran between the stalls, laughing as they chased each other with ribbons. The air smelled of roasted corn and fresh bread. It was the kind of day that didn't feel extraordinary at first, just warm and familiar until something unexpected happened. Deep among the visitors stood a woman named Lena. She was known by everyone simply as the farmer's wife. Her husband worked the land, and she helped with everything from feeding the animals to preparing meals to selling vegetables. In the small weekly market, to most people in the village, Lena was quiet, gentle, and always busy. They admired her for her hard work, but they never thought much more beyond that. She blended into the background, the way someone who works with their hands often does. She came to the festival hoping for a calm day, a short break from chores. She carried a small woven bag with fruit and some warm bread she planned to share with a friend. She didn't know that her entire life was about to change within a matter of minutes. On the main stage set up in the center of the festival stood a grand piano, polished, shining under the sunlight, and completely out of place among the wooden tables and simple stalls. The instrument had been brought by a well-known pianist, a man invited to perform for the guests. He wasn't from the village. He was from the city, someone who traveled to many places and played in front of large crowds. Today, he was the main attraction. People gathered as he finished a short performance and wiped the sweat from his brow. He looked relaxed, almost playful. Smiling at the crowd, he asked if anyone wanted to try playing a few notes on the piano. Most villagers laughed. Many shook their heads. No one wanted to embarrass themselves in front of such a skilled performer. The pianist teased the crowd, telling them they were too scared. He made a light joke about how even a farmer's wife could probably play something if she wanted. The audience chuckled. It was meant to be harmless, humorous. No one took it seriously. But Lena felt something stir inside her. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was something gentler, a memory she had pushed aside years ago. A memory of a small piano in her childhood home, one she used to play with curiosity and joy. Life had taken her in another direction, and slowly, she had stopped touching the piano keys. Work filled her days, and the sound of music seemed like something from another world. She didn't plan to step forward. She didn't come to the festival to draw attention to herself. But the pianist's words lingered in the air, and before she realized it, her feet began to move. The crowd turned to look as she walked quietly toward the stage. Some people whispered. Others laughed softly, assuming she was just joining in on the joke. A few felt nervous for her, thinking she might embarrass herself. Lena didn't hear them clearly. Her heartbeat drowned out everything. She simply felt pulled toward the piano, as if an invisible thread tugged her forward. The pianist raised his eyebrows, surprised that someone had actually accepted the challenge. He gave her a friendly, teasing smile and stepped aside to let her sit. He expected her to tap a few random keys, maybe play a simple children's tune. Nothing more. Lena stopped in front of the piano and looked at it carefully. The instrument felt large, almost intimidating. She brushed her hands along the smooth edge. It had been many years since she had been this close to a piano. Her fingers felt stiff, uncertain. But her heart felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a quiet excitement. She slowly sat on the bench. Her simple dress rustled lightly as she adjusted her seat. She took a small breath, trying to calm the tremble in her hands. Everyone watched, waiting to see what would happen. She lifted her fingers over the keys, but she didn't touch them yet. Instead, she closed her eyes for a moment. The world seemed to fade. She wasn't at a festival anymore. She wasn't surrounded by curious eyes. In her mind, she was a young girl again, sitting at a worn-out piano in her old home. She remembered the way her mother would smile when she practiced, the way the music filled the small room, making it feel brighter. When she opened her eyes, her hands felt steadier. She pressed a single key, and the note rang out, soft but clear. The sound traveled across the festival grounds, catching the attention of more people. Lena didn't rush. She let the note fade naturally before pressing another, then another. The pianist, who had been standing casually, noticed something different in the way her fingers moved. He straightened slightly, no longer wearing the same playful grin. Lena continued, playing a very simple melody. Her fingers hesitated in some places, yet the tune had a softness and warmth that made people lean closer. This wasn't someone who had never played before. This was someone who once loved the piano deeply. Children stopped running. Vendors turned away from their stalls. A small circle formed around the stage as people whispered in surprise. Lina's hands began to relax. She felt the familiar connection between her fingers and the keys, a connection she thought she had lost forever. Each sound reminded her of a past she had buried under years of responsibilities. The pianist exchanged looks with a few musicians standing nearby. They raised their eyebrows, equally stunned. No one had expected anything more than a few clumsy notes. Yet here she was, giving life to a melody with surprising confidence. Lina didn't notice the shift in the crowd. She didn't notice the awe growing around her. All she felt was the music guiding her hands, as if it had been waiting patiently inside her all these years. When she paused, the audience expected her to stand up and laugh nervously. But she didn't. She wasn't done. She placed her hands on the keys again, this time with more certainty. Her second attempt wasn't just a melody. It was the beginning of something fuller, richer, a pattern of notes that hinted at real skill. Gasps spread through the audience. The pianist's teasing expression disappeared entirely. He stepped closer to her, watching her hands with growing curiosity. He wasn't laughing anymore. He was studying her, as if trying to understand how someone so unassuming could play with such natural feeling. Lina continued, unaware of the effect she was having. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply remembering a part of herself that she had forgotten. The notes flowed gently from the piano, creating a soft, emotional atmosphere. People stood quietly, as if afraid to interrupt. A few of them exchanged glances, astonished that the woman they had always seen carrying baskets of vegetables or walking behind her husband in the fields was now filling the festival with music. Lina's heart beat louder, but not from fear, from something like joy. She hadn't felt this way in years. It was as though each note lifted a small weight from her chest. Finally, she let her hands fall back to her lap. The melody ended softly, almost like a whisper. Silence filled the festival. People stared at her, unsure of how to react. They had expected a joke, maybe a moment of light fun. But what they witnessed was something else entirely, something quietly beautiful. Lina looked up, her face slightly flushed. She didn't know what everyone was thinking. She didn't even know if she had played well. She only knew she had done something she never planned to do. The pianist blinked, still processing what had just happened. His amusement had turned into genuine respect, though he didn't say anything yet. And in that moment, quiet, uncertain, and filled with held breaths, the festival waited for what would happen next. The moment of silence after Lina stopped playing felt heavier than anything she had expected. She sat still, wondering if she had done something wrong or if the crowd just didn't know what to say. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers gently curled as though they still remembered the keys beneath them. She didn't dare look at anyone at first. The feeling of being watched made her chest tighten, and she wished for a second that she could quietly slip away before anyone spoke. But before she could move, a small sound broke the silence. It wasn't applause. It was just a soft breath from someone in the crowd, almost like a sigh of disbelief. Then someone else whispered something she couldn't quite hear. Then another. The quiet whisper spread slowly, like a ripple in water. Lina finally lifted her head. She wasn't prepared for what she saw. The people gathered around the stage weren't mocking her. They weren't laughing. Their eyes were wide with surprise, and some of them wore little smiles, the kind that appear when someone sees something unexpectedly beautiful. The pianist stood beside her, arms crossed but not in annoyance. He was studying her with an expression she didn't know how to read, part curiosity, part amazement. He opened his mouth slightly as if he wanted to ask her something, but didn't yet know the right words. Lina felt her cheeks warm. She wanted to say something. Maybe apologize for taking too long or for stepping on stage in the first place. She wasn't used to being looked at this way. She wasn't used to being noticed at all. Still, she managed a small, polite smile and started to rise from the bench, thinking her moment was over, that she had taken enough of everyone's attention. But the pianist lifted his hand gently, as if asking her to wait. "Would you like to try another?" he asked softly, his tone very different now. There was no teasing in his voice, no challenge, just a simple, genuine question. Lina blinked at him, unsure if she heard correctly. She stared down at her hands again. They were still slightly trembling, though not from fear this time, more from the leftover emotion of playing after so many years. I don't know," she whispered. Her voice barely made it past her lips. "It's up to you," he said. "No pressure, but you have a gift, and sometimes it feels good to share it." His words settled in the air like soft dust. Lina looked at the crowd again. Their eyes weren't pushing her or forcing her. They were waiting not in demand, but in quiet hope. She didn't know what pushed her to sit back down. Maybe it was the gentle encouragement in the pianist's voice. Maybe it was the memory that had awakened inside her those afternoons when she used to play, just for the joy of it, without thinking of time, responsibilities, or who might be listening. So she stayed. She took a deeper breath this time, letting the tension ease from her shoulders. Her fingers touched the keys again, lighter than before. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply wanted to feel the music again. The second piece she began wasn't something she remembered perfectly. It came back to her in pieces, like a puzzle she hadn't touched in years. She played a few notes, paused, played again, her hands moving slowly, shaping the melody bit by bit. The crowd leaned closer. Lena could hear someone murmuring in wonder. She heard a child whisper, "She plays pretty." Someone else shushed him gently, as though afraid to break the fragile magic forming in the air. The pianist stepped slightly behind her, listening carefully. His expression changed again. The more she played, the more his eyebrows relaxed, and a small look of admiration softened his features. Lena wasn't blind to the small mistakes her fingers made. She stumbled in a few places, hesitated in others, but she kept going. For the first time in years, she didn't scold herself in her mind. She didn't feel embarrassed. She simply let the music lead her. As the melody grew, something inside her loosened. Her movements became smoother, her breathing steadier. The awkwardness faded, replaced by a gentle confidence, the kind that blooms when someone remembers a part of themselves they thought they had lost forever. A light breeze drifted through the festival, carrying the sound across the field. People who hadn't been near the stage began walking toward it, drawn by the softness of the tune. Vendors stepped out from behind their tables. Older villagers paused in their conversations and turned their heads. More people gathered. Lena still didn't look at the crowd. She didn't dare. She didn't want the pressure of their eyes to break the fragile thread connecting her to the piano. As she continued playing, memories flashed through her mind, not like scenes from a story, but like feelings she had forgotten. The feeling of her mother's warm hand resting on her shoulder as she practiced. The feeling of sunlight through a window as she tried to master a small section of a song. The feeling of being proud of herself when she finally got it right. She felt those emotions now, layered with years of silence. When the melody finally reached its gentle end, she let her hands fall to her sides again. The crowd waited, breath held. She heard someone sniff quietly, wiping away a small tear. Another person whispered, "How did we never know?" And then, slowly at first but quickly building, applause filled the air. Not loud, wild applause. No shouting, no cheering. It was soft, warm, almost grateful. Clap after clap, rising like a wave of appreciation. Lena's eyes widened. She looked at her hands, unsure if she deserved such a reaction. She felt overwhelmed, like she had stepped into a moment she wasn't prepared for. The pianist placed a gentle hand on the top of the piano, leaning toward her with a smile that held no teasing, only respect. "That was wonderful," he said softly. "Truly." Lena swallowed, unsure how to respond. No one had said something like that about her in a long time. "I used to play," she said quietly, barely above a whisper. "A long time ago, it shows," he replied. "You didn't lose it. You only hid it. Maybe even from yourself." She looked down, unsure how to answer. She felt exposed but in a warm, healing way, as if someone had opened a window inside her that had been closed for far too long. A woman from the crowd stepped forward, smiling brightly. "We had no idea you could play like that," she said. "All these years, and you never told anyone." Lena opened her mouth but didn't know what to say. She wasn't trying to hide anything. Life had simply filled her days so completely that there had been no room left for music. Another man stepped closer. "Play again," he encouraged. "If you want to." His tone was gentle, not demanding. Lena shook her head softly. She felt full, overwhelmed, and unsure if she could play a third piece without her emotions spilling over. But something inside her had awakened now, something she couldn't ignore. She stood from the bench, taking a small step back. Her legs wobbled slightly from the rush of emotion. The crowd parted respectfully as she began to walk away from the piano, not because they were disappointed, but because they wanted to give her space. They watched her with a mixture of admiration and quiet curiosity. As she walked, the pianist stepped forward again. "Wait," he called gently. She paused and turned. "You have real talent," he said. "If you ever want help, or want to play again, come find me before I leave." Lena nodded, unsure if she would ever gather the courage to approach him again. But the offer warmed her heart. When she finally slipped back into the crowd, people greeted her with soft smiles. Some nodded at her respectfully. Others whispered about what they had just heard. Lena tucked her hands close to her chest, feeling the faint trace of music still tingling in her fingertips. She didn't know what the rest of the festival would bring. She didn't know what the pianist truly thought or if he would remember her after. The day ended, but one thing was certain: her quiet moment on the stage had stirred something inside her that was not going to fade so easily. And deep down, though she didn't say it aloud, part of her wondered what might happen if she allowed herself to play again. Lena walked away from the stage as calmly as she could, but inside her heart was racing. The sound of the piano still echoed in her mind. Even as she tried to blend back into the crowd, she felt as if everyone's eyes were still on her. People smiled kindly when they saw her, but no one stopped her or crowded her. They simply gave her a quiet sort of respect that she wasn't used to receiving. She found a small empty spot near one of the food stalls and sat down on a wooden bench. Her hands were still warm from touching the piano. She held them together, rubbing her fingers gently as though she might lose the feeling if she didn't. She closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about everything that had just happened. She had only walked onto the stage because of a simple challenge a challenge meant as a playful joke. She hadn't planned to play. She definitely hadn't planned to reveal something so personal. But the moment she touched the keys, something inside her woke up. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. As she sat there, trying to calm her thoughts, a soft voice interrupted her. "Are you all right?" She opened her eyes and saw an older woman standing nearby. Her gray hair was tied back neatly, and her kind eyes were focused on Lena. She wore an apron covered in flour, probably from one of the food stalls. "I'm fine," Lena replied gently, just a little overwhelmed. "That was beautiful," the woman said with a warm smile. "I don't think any of us were expecting it. You touched a lot of hearts today." Lena lowered her gaze shyly. Compliments were hard for her. She never knew how to respond to them. "Thank you," she whispered. The woman moved on, leaving Lena alone again. But the warmth of her words stayed. A few minutes later, she saw the pianist stepping off the stage. People greeted him as he walked, and he spoke politely to everyone. But his eyes kept scanning the crowd as if he was looking for someone. Lena felt her stomach twist. She hoped he wasn't searching for her, not because she didn't want to talk to him, but because she didn't know what she would say if he did. But her hope was short-lived. He spotted her sitting alone and began walking toward her. His steps weren't rushed, but there was purpose in them. Lena straightened slightly, unsure whether to stand or stay seated. She settled on staying where she was, her hands folding neatly on her lap. When he stopped in front of her, his expression was calm but serious, not stern, just thoughtful. "May I sit?" he asked. She nodded softly, and he took a seat on the other end of the bench. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the festival filled the air: children laughing, people chatting, music playing faintly from another stall, but somehow it all felt distant. "You surprised me," he finally said. Lena looked down at her hands. "I surprised myself," she admitted. "That wasn't beginner playing," he continued. "You've trained before, haven't you?" Her breath caught slightly. She didn't expect him to notice so quickly. "I learned when I was younger," she said quietly. "But that was a long time ago." "How long?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "Many years. Maybe 15. Maybe more." He exhaled slowly, almost in disbelief. "And you haven't played during that time?" Lena shook her head. "Life became busy. I got married, moved to the farm, and, well, there was never time." He watched her for a moment, his eyes softening. "It's not easy to let go of something you once loved." Lena looked at him, surprised by how simply he understood it. "It wasn't that I wanted to let go," she said quietly. "I just didn't think about it anymore. I didn't have the chance." He nodded thoughtfully. "But the moment you touched the piano again, it all came back." She smiled faintly. "Not perfectly. I made mistakes." He shook his head. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is how you play, not how perfectly. And you play with feeling. That's something people can't learn easily." Lena looked away, her eyes drifting toward the stage. She remembered how the keys had felt under her fingers, how the music seemed to fill a part of her that had been empty for years. "What you did out there," the pianist said softly. "It wasn't ordinary." Lena didn't know how to respond to that. She wasn't used to big words or deep compliments. She only knew how to work hard, keep quiet, and stay humble. "You have something rare," he continued, And I hope you don't hide it again. I'm not sure I can do anything with it, she said honestly. My life is full already. The farm, my responsibilities. He leaned back slightly, thinking, do you ever take time for yourself? She hesitated. Not really. There's always something to do. Everyone deserves a little space, he said. Even if it's just a few minutes each day. Maybe you could play again. Not for anyone else. Just for yourself. Lena looked at him, and for the first time she allowed herself to imagine the idea of playing again. Maybe even every day, even if just for a short while. It felt strange and wonderful at the same time. If I could, she whispered, I think I would. The pianist smiled, a gentle, approving smile. Then start small. No pressure. But don't let yours pass again without touching the keys. Lena nodded slowly. She appreciated his words more than she expected. They felt sincere, not rehearsed or professional. He wasn't talking to her as a performer. He was talking to her as a person who understood what music meant. They sat quietly again for a moment. You know, he said after a pause, when you walked on stage, I thought you were nervous because you didn't know how to play. But I realize now, your nervousness was because you remembered what you lost. Lena looked at him, surprised by how accurately he had read her. Maybe, she said softly. He stood up slowly. If you decide to come by later, he said kindly, I'll be near the stage. I'd like to hear you play again before I leave. He didn't say it with pressure or expectation. He said it as someone offering a chance, not asking for anything in return. As he walked back toward the stage, Lena watched him quietly. She didn't know whether she would have the courage to approach him again, but a part of her small but growing wanted to. The rest of the festival went on as usual, but for Lena everything felt different now. The colors seemed brighter. The music from the stalls felt richer. Even the laughter of children sounded lighter. She wandered through the festival, trying to clear her mind. People greeted her warmly wherever she went. Some nodded at her as if they had seen something special in her. Others whispered softly to one another, surprised by the talent she had kept hidden. Lena didn't feel embarrassed anymore. Instead, she felt something else, something she hadn't felt in years. Pride, not the loud, boastful kind. Just a quiet, gentle pride, the kind that makes someone stand a little taller. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, Lena found herself drifting back toward the stage. She didn't plan to go there. Her feet simply led her in that direction, guided by a feeling she couldn't quite explain. The pianist was speaking with a few people, answering their questions, smiling politely. But when his eyes met hers, he gave a small nod, as if saying, I'm still here. The offer still stands. Lena hesitated for a long moment. Then, slowly, she stepped closer, not to play again, not yet, but to listen, to learn, and to let the music settle deeper into the part of her that had awakened. And as she stood near the stage, hidden in the soft glow of the setting sun, the pianist glanced toward her one more time, no longer surprised, no longer curious, only respectful. He had seen her talent, but more importantly, she had begun to see it too. She woke before sunrise the next morning, though she had barely slept at all. Her mind had replayed every note she played in the hall, every expression she saw on the faces of the listeners, and every word the maestro spoke afterward. It all felt unreal, like she had stepped into a story that did not belong to her. But the soft ache in her fingers and the memory of the audience leaning forward reminded her that it really had happened. She moved quietly around the small house so she wouldn't wake her husband. The kettle warmed on the stove, and she sat near the window, looking out at the fields wrapped in early light. For years she had spent her mornings preparing for long days of work. But that morning something felt different. She sensed that life had shifted in a way she didn't fully understand yet. Something new had opened, like a long closed door. As she sipped her tea, she thought about the Maestro's invitation. He wanted her to return that evening, not for a show, but to try playing more pieces. He said he wanted to learn where she had picked up such skill. She had no proper training, no books, and no teacher. She learned by listening, by watching traveling musicians, by playing old songs she remembered from childhood. That was all. Still, something inside her told her she had to go back. When her husband finally stepped into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, she looked at him with the same mixture of excitement and fear she felt inside. He sat down beside her, sensing that her mind was elsewhere. Couldn't sleep? He asked softly. Not much, she admitted. He nodded. You were thinking about yesterday. It wasn't a question. He had seen her come home glowing with energy and trembling with nerves. She tried to speak, but her throat felt tight. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know why he wants me back. I'm just someone who plays at home." Her husband shook his head gently. "That's not all you are. I've known for years that you play differently. Yesterday, everyone else saw it too." She lowered her eyes. Compliments always felt heavy, as if she didn't deserve them. But he reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You should go again," he said. "You should see where this leads." His voice was calm, but there was something steady and confident in it that helped her breathe again. After breakfast, she stepped outside. The sky had brightened, and a soft breeze carried the scent of earth and leaves. She walked toward the old shed where the small piano sat. Structurally, the shed was worn, roof patched in places, walls faded from years of sun, but inside, it felt like a sanctuary. The piano had belonged to a family friend who passed away years ago. Many people saw it as a useless piece of old furniture, but for her, it was the doorway into a world where time didn't matter. She removed the covering cloth and ran her fingers lightly over the keys. They were chipped and uneven, but familiar. She pressed one key, then another, listening to the soft echo fill the quiet shed. Though the instrument was out of tune, she could still feel the music under her hands. She played slowly at first, letting her fingers warm up. Notes flowed like small drops of light, simple and gentle. Her breath softened as she played, and the nervous thoughts in her mind loosened their grip. Then she shifted into a melody she had played as a child. It was one she used to hum while helping her mother. The tune was simple but full of emotion. As she played, memories filled her mind, running through fields, sitting beside her father as he worked, the sound of the wind at night, the warmth of a home where music was a rare gift. She kept playing for a long time, forgetting everything else. But when she finally lifted her hands, she realized her husband had been standing near the door for several minutes listening. "You play like you're telling a story," he said quietly. She blushed. "I just play what I feel." He stepped closer. That might be exactly what people need. Later that afternoon, she found herself pacing the kitchen as the sun dipped lower. The closer the evening came, the more the nerves returned. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear of playing, but from fear of being seen. She had always played for herself, for comfort, for calm. Now she had to play because someone expected something from her. When it was finally time to leave, her husband walked with her to the hall. Though the evening air was cool, her palms felt warm and damp. As they approached the building, she noticed lights glowing through the windows and heard faint chatter from inside. She felt her breath catch. "I thought only the Maestro would be here," she whispered. Her husband looked through the open door. "It seems others came too. Maybe they heard about yesterday." She froze for a moment. A small group of people stood inside, some musicians, some staff from the hall, and a few friends of the Maestro. They weren't an audience, not in the formal sense, but their presence made her chest tighten. The Maestro approached with a warm smile. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I wasn't sure you would." "I didn't expect so many people," she whispered. "They're only here because they're curious," he assured her. "No pressure, no stage, just music. Play whatever you want." She nodded slowly, though the anxiety still weighed on her. Her husband gave her a reassuring look before stepping aside. The Maestro guided her to the piano in the center of the room. The instrument was polished, beautiful, and intimidating compared to the old piano in her shed. When she sat down, her heart pounded loudly in her ears. Everyone fell silent, watching her with quiet interest. She placed her hands gently on the keys, exhaled slowly, and closed her eyes. The room disappeared. At first, she played the same melody she had practiced that afternoon. Her fingers moved carefully, as though she was feeling her way in the dark. But as the familiar notes filled the room, her tension melted away. Her breathing steadied. Her shoulders relaxed. She moved into a second piece, this one more emotional and flowing. It carried the sound of longing, of hope, of memories she never spoke aloud. It was as if her heart was speaking through the music, telling stories without words. When she played, the room seemed to shift. People who had been standing casually now leaned forward, drawn in by something they couldn't explain. The musicians exchanged looks of disbelief. Her husband blinked back tears. Even the Maestro stood still, arms crossed gently, watching her with quiet awe. The final notes drifted into silence. She opened her eyes slowly, unsure of what she would see. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. It felt like the world had paused. Then the Maestro stepped toward her. "You have something rare," he said softly. "Not just talent, heart, emotion, truth. I want to help you go further, if you're willing." Her breath caught in her throat. She looked toward her husband, who nodded with gentle pride. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know how far she could go or what she might learn, but for the first time in her life, she felt a quiet flame of belief warming inside her. She smiled faintly. "I'm willing," she said. And the room, still caught in the spell of her music, felt lighter, brighter, filled with the beginning of something she never imagined would happen. She woke with a strange mix of calm and excitement the next morning, as if her whole body already knew something important was about to happen. The sun had barely risen, yet the air carried a soft warmth that made her step outside for a moment. She stood on the porch, gazing at the quiet fields. Everything looked ordinary, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. It was as if life had stretched wider overnight. The Maestro had asked her to return again, not to perform for anyone, not to prove anything, but simply to explore what she could become. She wasn't used to people believing in her. She wasn't used to seeing herself as someone with anything to offer beyond her home and her work. But now, after the way the room had listened to her the night before, something inside her had shifted. She went back into the house and found her husband preparing tea. He looked up, smiling the way he had since the moment he first heard her play in the hall. "You slept better?" he asked. She nodded. "A little. My mind is still full, but I feel lighter." He handed her a warm cup. "Whatever happens now, just know I'm proud of you. Not because of the piano, because you finally let people see who you really are." Her eyes softened. She didn't have the words to answer, so she simply held his hand for a moment. After breakfast, she took time to walk through the fields. She needed space to think, to breathe, to understand everything the Maestro had said the night before. He wanted to guide her, help her grow, help her discover more about her gift. It felt overwhelming but also meaningful. As she walked, she thought about how music had always been a private world for her, something she entered when life became heavy, something she used to feel alive in the quiet moments. She had never imagined sharing that world with crowds or with well-known musicians. She had never imagined it could matter to anyone else. But maybe it did. Maybe that was why people had fallen silent when she played. Maybe that was why the Maestro looked at her with hope, not surprised. When the afternoon came, she returned to the shed. She lifted the cloth off the old piano once more, as she had done countless times before. But now, when her fingers touched the keys, she felt a new sense of purpose. She wasn't just playing to escape. She was playing to grow. She began with soft notes, letting her fingers glide with ease. She allowed the music to rise and fall gently, shaping feelings she couldn't put into words. Then she moved into more complex patterns, listening closely to her timing, adjusting her touch, correcting small mistakes. She felt as if the instrument itself was guiding her. Time slipped by without her noticing. When she finally stopped, she heard footsteps outside the shed. Her husband leaned in the doorway again, smiling. "They're waiting for you in town," he said softly. Her heart tightened a little. "Is it a big group today?" "Not a crowd," he said. "Just people who want to hear you again." And the Maestro, she let out a slow breath. She wasn't sure if she was nervous or excited, maybe both. Before leaving, she took one more look at the old piano. She felt grateful for it in a way she never had before. It had been her companion for years, the one place she could express herself freely. She touched the wooden frame gently, whispering a quiet thank you under her breath. When she and her husband reached the hall, she was surprised to find the atmosphere different from the night before. It wasn't filled with chatter or curiosity. Instead, it felt warm and welcoming, almost like people had been waiting for a friend to arrive. The Maestro walked up with a relieved expression. "I hoped you would come," he said. She gave a shy smile. "I almost didn't, but I think I'm ready to learn." "Good," he said, "because I want to show you something." He led her to the same piano she had played the night before. But this time, instead of asking her to play, he sat beside her. "I want you to try something new," he said. "Follow my lead, but not with your eyes. Listen, feel, respond." She nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure what he meant. The Maestro played a few soft chords, gentle, thoughtful. Then he paused. She waited. He played the same chords again, and this time she felt something stir. She placed her fingers on the keys and responded with a simple melody. It blended with his chords like sunlight blending with shadows. He smiled. "Good, now don't think, just listen." He shifted into a new progression, richer, deeper. She responded instinctively, letting her fingers find notes that felt right. The room fell into a soft silence around them, as if the world had paused once again to listen. They played together for several minutes. At first, she was unsure, but soon the music felt like a conversation, his chords asking questions, her melodies answering. It was tender and natural, as if they had been playing together for years. When the music finally faded, she let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You feel the music," the maestro said quietly. "You don't copy it. You don't follow rules. You follow emotion. That is rare, very rare." She didn't know what to say. He continued gently, "If you want, I can teach you more. Not to change the way you play, but to help you understand it better. To give you tools, not limits." Her eyes softened. "Why would you spend your time on someone like me?" He shook his head. "Because greatness doesn't always come from big cities or famous families. Sometimes it comes from quiet homes and hidden hearts. You have something people search for their whole lives. You only need someone to help you shape it." Her throat tightened. She looked down, blinking away the emotion building in her eyes. "I don't want to lose the way I play," she whispered. "You won't," he said. "You'll only grow." They spent the next hour exploring different melodies. Sometimes she played alone. Sometimes he joined. Sometimes the musicians who had gathered added soft notes in the background. It felt less like a lesson and more like a shared moment of discovery. When she finally stood up from the piano, she felt exhausted yet full of life. Her husband met her with a warm smile. "You looked happy," he said. "I think I am," she replied. "So what happens now?" he asked. She looked back at the piano, then at the maestro, then at the people waiting quietly around the hall. "I don't know exactly," she admitted, "but I want to keep going. I want to see where this leads." Her husband nodded. "Then that's enough." Before she left, the maestro approached her one last time. "Take your time," he said. "There is no rush. You don't have to become anything you don't want to become. But if you choose to continue, I'll be here to guide you. And I believe many people will want to hear you play again." His words stayed with her as she and her husband walked home. The sun was setting now, bathing the fields in warm orange light. She felt the world around her settle into a peaceful quiet, as if giving her space to understand her own feelings. She knew she wasn't going to transform overnight. She wasn't going to become someone completely different. She was still the same woman who woke early to work on the farm, who played music to ease her heart. But she was also something more now, someone who had been seen, someone who had been heard, someone who finally understood that her gift wasn't meant to stay hidden. As she walked through the fading light, she felt a soft smile spread across her face. Whatever path lay ahead, she wasn't afraid. She was ready to follow it, note by note, step by step, with her heart leading the way.